Sometimes we go through things that change the shape of our heart. Love, loss, work, people, all of it leaves a mark. And when the noise settles, what we're really looking for isn't answers, it's peace. My name is Curio, and here on Whisper Light Vibes, I don't come to teach or preach. I come to share stories I've lived, lessons I've learned, and thoughts that help me find my way back to myself. Maybe you've been there too, loving someone who broke you, fighting battles no one could see, or trying to stay strong when you felt like fading. This space is for all of us who are still learning, to heal, to grow, to forgive. So take a breath, sit with me for a while. Let's walk through this story together. Maybe somewhere along the way, we'll find a little light in the quiet.
I was 30 when she walked into my life. Or maybe I should say, when she found me. Back then, I thought I was fine. Divorced, yes, a little hollow, a little lost, but I told myself that was just what healing looked like. I had a son, 7 years old, bright and gentle, who stayed with his mother most days. And in the quiet of my apartment, I learned the sound of loneliness. I wasn't crying. It was the hum of the fridge, the echo of footsteps that used to belong to two, now belonging to one. I'd been married too young, to a woman who measured life in numbers, the size of the house, price of the car, the zeros in the account. We didn't fight much, not because we were peaceful, but because silence was cheaper than honesty. When it ended, I told myself I would live simpler. No more proving, no more pretending. Then she appeared. She wasn't quiet. She was light itself. She had that kind of presence that rearranged a room. Every word she spoke felt charged, like it carried its own electricity. When she laughed, you didn't just hear it, you felt it, like warm wind on your face after a long winter. We met through a mutual friend. She had a son too, 9 years old. We both carried the same kind of ache, single parents trying to piece together something that felt like a future. She told me, "You've got this calm energy, like nothing can break you." I remember smiling. I didn't know that those words would become the rope she'd later pull when she wanted to test my strength. But in the beginning, everything was bright. She made me believe again, in connection, in laughter, in mornings that felt worth waking for. We'd stay up late talking about philosophy, love, and the strange coincidences that had brought us here. She told me I was different from other men, more real, she said. When someone looks you in the eye and says that, after you'd been left feeling invisible, it's hard not to believe them. She'd text me good morning with sun emojis, tell me to eat, to rest, to take care. And I did, because for the first time, someone seemed to care. She told me she believed in me when I didn't even believe in myself. It was a kind of magic, but like most magic, it came with a cost I didn't yet understand. The first signs were small, so small they slipped through the cracks of reason. One night over dinner, she said, "Do you remember who pulled you out of that dark place after your divorce? Who was there when everyone else disappeared?" I nodded. She smiled, but it wasn't warmth. It was confirmation, as if my gratitude was the proof she needed to feel powerful. At first, I brushed it off. We all want recognition, don't we? But over time, her reminders became regular, like echoes. I was the one who helped you believe again. No one else would have stood by you the way I did. It wasn't just memory anymore. It was currency. Every kindness she gave was an investment she expected to collect interest on. She loved to be admired. She'd tell me stories about men who praised her, clients, old friends, people at work. Each story ended the same way, her eyes searching mine, waiting for me to echo what they said, to confirm what she already believed. Once when I didn't, she went quiet. Later that night she said, "You never notice things about me anymore. Maybe that's why others do." I remember the cold that sentence left behind. It wasn't anger, it was a quiet kind of guilt, the kind that makes you question yourself. So I began praising her more, her dress, her words, her strength, and she smiled again. For a while, that was enough. But love, when built on conditions, starts to tilt under its own weight. She began comparing me to her ex, not with cruelty, but with precision. He had his flaws, but he was successful. Or, "You're calm, sometimes too calm. He'd know how to handle me." I laughed it off, tried to turn it into a joke. But at night, I lay awake thinking about money, success, control, things I'd promised myself didn't define me. She had managed to make me doubt the peace I had worked so hard to build. It's strange how love can sound like encouragement, but feel like erosion. She wasn't cruel, she was hungry. For validation, for admiration, for a mirror that reflected only her best angles. And I became that mirror. I didn't see it yet. I just felt tired. But in love, people call that devotion. And in those early months, when she laughed in my kitchen, when our sons played in the living room, I thought maybe, just maybe, this was what healing looked like. Once someone told me that love after heartbreak is like learning to walk again. You're still limping, but you call it dancing. I didn't know then that the woman I loved would one day teach me about shadows, not because she lived in the dark, but because she carried her own light so fiercely that it blinded me to everything else.
It's funny how love changes temperature. At first, it burns bright, like sunlight on river water. Then slowly, quietly, it turns cool. You don't even notice it happening until one day you reach out for warmth, and all that's left is reflection. And that's how it was with her. The first time I felt something shift, it was over something small. We were having dinner, noodles, takeout, her favorite. She scrolled through her phone showing me photos. "Look," she said, "this guy from work keeps saying I look like an actress." She laughed, brushing it off, but her eyes stayed on me. So I smiled and said, "He's not wrong." Her laughter was instant, warm again. "You're sweet," she said, leaning in. "That's what I love about you. You always know what to say." I didn't. I was just learning what she needed to hear. Weeks passed. Then came the first argument. I can't even remember what started it. Something small, something meaningless. What I remember is how big it became. One moment we were talking, the next she was crying, shouting, saying I didn't care enough. Her voice trembled, not with anger, but with hurt. And I panicked, because I didn't want to hurt her. I wanted to protect her, to make things right. So I apologized, even though I didn't know what for. That became a pattern. Whenever she felt small, I'd shrink my own truth to make her feel tall again. And the more I did it, the more she needed it. When we're in love with a narcissist, the pain doesn't arrive all at once. It comes like waves, soft at first, almost rhythmic, until one day you realize you've been standing in water too deep to breathe. I remember one night after another argument, She said she felt unseen. I asked her what she meant. "You're too calm," she said. "You don't fight for me. You don't react." I told her I didn't want to fight with her. I wanted to fight for us. She looked at me, almost disappointed, like she was waiting for fire but got rain instead. I didn't know it then, but for someone like her, chaos meant connection. If things were peaceful, she couldn't feel alive, so she stirred storms just to watch me flinch. After that, I started to lose pieces of myself, slowly, quietly. I stopped sharing how I really felt because every emotion was met with comparison. When I told her I was struggling at work, she said, "My ex never complained like that. He just fixed things." When I told her I missed my son, she said, "You're too soft. You let emotions control you." But if I grew distant, she'd pull me back. "You're my rock," she whispered. "Don't ever leave me." So I stayed. Because when a man loves deeply, he confuses endurance with strength. One evening, I suggested we see a therapist, for both of us. She laughed. "Therapists are for people who can't handle their own minds," she said. Then she looked at me and added, softly, "But maybe you should see one. You overthink things." It stung, but I did. The therapist, a quiet woman with kind eyes, listened as I spoke about love that felt both nourishing and draining. After a while, she said, "You're describing a cycle of idealization and devaluation." I asked her what that meant. She explained that some people, not out of evil, but out of emptiness, build their self-worth by being adored. They mirror what you need. They study you, reflect your dreams back at you. And once they feel secure in your love, they begin to test it, not consciously, but compulsively, to see if you'll still stay when they make you feel small. Her words hit me like cold wind. I left her office that day with more questions than answers. One thing echoed in my mind. Love shouldn't require you to disappear. When I tried to talk to her about it, she smiled. That same disarming smile. "You're reading too much into things," she said. And she kissed me, softly, like punctuation at the end of a sentence she didn't want to discuss. It worked for a while, because love, when it's mixed with guilt and hope, becomes a kind of drug. She started repeating the same stories, the same acts of kindness she'd done for me. "Remember when I took care of you and you were sick? Remember when I stayed up late just to help you finish that project?" Each story ended the same way. A look that asked, "What have you done for me lately?" I began to realize that her love wasn't unconditional. It was transactional. And every time I gave, the price went up. One night I asked her quietly, "Do you ever feel like you need people to praise you?" She froze, then laughed. "You make it sound like a bad thing to want to feel appreciated." "It's not," I said. "But sometimes it feels like you need it, more than love itself." She didn't speak. She just stood up and walked out. For 3 days, silence. No texts, no calls. And when she finally came back, she cried. Said I made her feel unloved, misunderstood. And I apologized, even though a part of me knew I shouldn't. That's how control works. Not through dominance, but through guilt. A therapist told me once, a narcissist doesn't destroy you directly. They let you do it to yourself, out of love. And I did, because deep down, I believed that if I just loved her enough, she'd heal. That if I showed her what real affection looked like, she'd finally stop needing validation from the world. But love can't fill the hole someone refuses to face.
They say the hardest part of loving someone like her isn't when she leaves. It's when you realize you've already left yourself. I remember that realization clearly. It wasn't traumatic. No yelling, no door slamming, no broken glass. Just silence. A heavy, deep silence that filled the space where love used to echo. That morning, she woke before me. I could hear her in the kitchen, humming. The smell of coffee drifted through the air, the same scent that used to mean comfort. I walked out, still half asleep, and she smiled. But it wasn't the same smile. It was the one she wore when she needed something. You know, she said, stirring her cup slowly, I've been thinking a lot lately. I deserve more. I asked, more what? She looked at me like it was obvious. More appreciation, more excitement, more ambition. Then she said softly, almost kindly, you used to inspire me. Now you just calm me. Her words were meant to sound reflective, almost philosophical. But what I heard was, you're not enough anymore. When a narcissist begins to pull away, they don't always leave. Sometimes they just stop seeing you. You become part of the furniture, something that was once beautiful, now just background. She started talking more about other people again. A man at her gym who knew how to treat a woman. A client who listened better than most. All casual mentions, said with a grin, watching my eyes carefully. It wasn't jealousy she wanted, it was reaction, because reaction meant proof. Proof she still mattered enough to move me. I learned to stay quiet, but silence in that world is betrayal. She accused me of being distant, of not caring, of changing. And maybe I had changed. I was beginning to wake up. The last argument began with something small, like always. She was upset that I hadn't texted her during my lunch break. I told her I'd been busy in a meeting. She said, you used to make time. You used to love me differently. I wanted to tell her that I still loved her, but differently because I was breaking. Instead, I said nothing. Then she started listing names. My ex never forgot to text me. Men like you always find excuses. You're too emotional, too weak. Her words hit me harder than I expected, because I realized she didn't mean to wound me. She needed to. Pain was her way of keeping connection alive. That night, I went for a drive. No destination, just the road, the hum of the engine, and my thoughts. The city lights blurred through the windshield like constellations I didn't recognize. I parked by the river, the same one we used to walk along when things were new. And I sat there, watching the water move, calm on the surface, restless beneath. I thought about how love can be like that too. That's when I said it out loud, the words I hadn't dared to speak before. I'm not the same man anymore. And I wasn't. I wasn't the man who thought love meant rescuing someone. I wasn't the man who mistook control for connection. I wasn't the man who apologized just to keep peace. I was tired, but awake. The next day, I told her I needed space. She laughed at first, like it was a joke. Then she grew quiet. You're leaving me? She asked. I said, I'm not leaving you. I'm coming back to myself. She stared at me, eyes narrowing, not angry, just calculating. Then came the words I'll never forget. After everything I've done for you? She said it like a spell, one she'd cast many times before, reminding me of the times she'd stayed, the times she'd comforted me, the times she'd given me what she called love. Each one a coin she wanted back with interest. But this time, something inside me didn't bend. I said, "You did those things because you loved me, not because I owed you." And in her silence, I saw the truth. She didn't understand love without transaction. The breakup wasn't loud. It was slow, like ice melting. She drifted out of my life in fragments. A few texts, a few late-night calls, then nothing. At first, the emptiness was unbearable. I missed her voice, her presence, even the chaos. But grief is strange. It disguises itself as love until it burns itself out. I started therapy again. I told my therapist I felt lost, like part of me was still tied to her. She nodded, said softly, "That's trauma bonding. You were taught that love equals anxiety." I asked, "How do you break it?" She smiled gently. "You don't fight the bond. You replace it with truth, with self-worth, with silence that doesn't hurt." Healing wasn't cinematic. There were no grand epiphanies, just small moments. Morning coffee without dread, laughter without caution, quiet nights without walking on eggshells. And slowly, I began to understand. Some people love you as deeply as they are capable, and that depth might be shallow, but it's still real in their way. Forgiving her wasn't about freeing her. It was about freeing me. I stopped asking why she was the way she was, and started asking why I stayed. That's when I found my peace. Today, when I look back, I don't feel anger. I feel gratitude, the kind that stings, but still feels like light. Because she taught me what kind of love I will never accept again. She taught me the difference between connection and possession. And in a strange way, she gave me back something sacred, myself. If you're listening to this and you're still in that place, that in-between space of love and loss, hear me when I say this. You're not broken for loving someone who couldn't love you back the same way. You're human. And when you learn to love without losing yourself, that's when love becomes real.
Healing is strange. People think it happens in moments, a decision, a sunrise, a new love. But real healing doesn't announce itself. It slips into your life quietly, the way dawn does after a long night. After she left, I didn't rush to fill the silence. For the first time in years, I let it stay. The silence was uncomfortable at first. It made me restless, made me want to call her, to scroll through old messages, to reread the good parts and pretend the rest never happened. But I didn't. I let the silence become part of me. It was my teacher now. My therapist once told me, "We repeat what we don't repair." I'd spent my whole life trying to fix broken things, relationships, people, situations, believing that love meant endurance. But she asked me something that stuck. What if endurance is just fear dressed as loyalty? I didn't know how to answer that. So I began to write. Every morning, before the world woke up, I'd pour my thoughts into a journal. Not pretty words, just truth. Today, I missed her again. Today, I hated her. Today, I felt nothing. Today, I laughed and it scared me. Day by day, the ink became lighter. Not because I forgot her, but because I remembered myself. The therapist helped me see patterns, how narcissists love in circles, idealize, devalue, discard, repeat. How they project their pain so they never have to face it, and how people like me, empathetic, loyal, hopeful, often mistake that cycle for depth. But she didn't want me to see myself as a victim. She said, "You weren't weak for staying. You were strong for loving in a place that had no light. But now your strength must change form, from endurance to boundaries." Boundaries. That word felt foreign at first, like a wall I didn't know how to build. But over time, I learned that boundaries aren't walls, they're doors. You decide who walks through and when. I began practicing stillness. Not just silence, stillness. There's a difference. Silence is the absence of noise. Stillness is the presence of peace. Every morning, I'd sit by my window, coffee in hand, and just breathe. No phone, no distractions, just air and thought. I started noticing small things again. The sound of my son's laughter when he called from his mother's house. The weight of the evening breeze against my skin. The way sunlight looked when it hit my coffee cup. It sounds small, but those details brought me back to life. Because healing isn't about forgetting, it's about returning to presence, to truth, to self. A year passed, and somewhere in that time, the pain softened into understanding. I saw her once, by chance, in a cafe we used to go to. She looked the same, beautiful, composed. She saw me, smiled, and said, "You look different." I told her, "I am." We talked for a few minutes, polite, distant. She mentioned how her life was busy, how people didn't understand her, and how she was trying to find balance. The words sounded familiar, the same melody, different verse. When she left, I felt no bitterness, only gratitude, because she was still chasing the same storm, and I was finally standing in the sun. In therapy, I learned something that changed how I see love. We attract people who reflect the lessons we refuse to learn. She had been my mirror, showing me the parts of myself that craved validation, that feared abandonment, that equated love with sacrifice. She wasn't my enemy. She was my teacher. And maybe I was hers too. People sometimes ask me now, "Would you ever love again?" And I tell them, yes, but differently. Not with desperation, not with the need to be needed, but with peace, with awareness. Love isn't about completing someone, it's about sharing completion. Two whole souls walking side by side, not two halves clinging to survive. I used to think stoicism meant shutting down feelings, but I've learned it's the opposite. It's about feeling everything deeply, but letting nothing own you. That's what freedom feels like. To love and not lose yourself. To care and still choose peace. To be kind, but not at the cost of your sanity. Sometimes at night, I still think of her, not with longing, not with regret, but with calm remembrance. She was a chapter, not the book. And I'm still writing. Now my life feels quieter, but not empty. I spend weekends with my son, teaching him that love doesn't mean fixing broken people, but learning to stand beside those who heal with you. We go hiking sometimes. I tell him stories about rivers, trees, and how even nature knows when to let go, when to shed leaves, when to rest, when to start again. He listens and then says, "Dad, that sounds like people." And I smile and say, "It is, son, it is." If you're listening to this now, wherever you are, maybe still in the middle of the storm or standing in the quiet after, remember this. You don't have to hate the people who hurt you to heal. You just have to stop letting their shadow cover your light. Healing doesn't happen all at once.
It happens every time you choose truth over fantasy, peace over chaos, growth over guilt. And one day, you'll wake up, look in the mirror, and realize you're not surviving anymore. You're living.
There's a sound I've grown to love, the wind moving through the trees outside my home. It doesn't speak, not in words, but it says things if you listen long enough. It reminds me that everything moves, everything passes, and everything, in its own time, returns to calm. That's what healing is like. Not a destination, but a rhythm. Like breathing, like the tide, like forgiveness. A few months ago, I found one of her old letters, tucked in a drawer I hadn't opened in years. For a moment, I froze. Not because I missed her, but because it felt like touching a version of myself I'd outgrown. The handwriting was familiar, bold, emotional, alive. She'd written, "You make me feel like the world is right again." I smiled reading it. Back then, I thought love meant being someone's world. Now I know. Love means walking beside someone while they find their own. I don't blame her. She was doing what she knew, chasing validation the way some chase air. And I was doing what I knew, mistaking giving for connection, endurance for devotion. We were both learning. We just learned in different directions. The truth is, not everyone who enters your life is meant to stay. Some come to teach, some to test, and some to remind you what you still need to heal. She was all three. After everything, I've learned that pain is not the opposite of love. Indifference is. Pain means you cared, you hoped, you tried. But healing means you learn that caring doesn't always mean staying. That's something I wish someone had told me sooner. When you love a narcissist, or anyone lost in their own reflection, you start to disappear. At first, it feels like love. You bend, you adapt, you accommodate. But slowly, you become invisible. And one day, you realize you're clapping for someone who never shows up for you. That realization hurts, but it's sacred, because it's the moment you begin to come back home. My therapist used to say, "You can't heal what you don't name." So I named it. The control, the guilt, the manipulation disguised as care. But I also named my part in it, my silence, my fear, my habit of confusing love with proof. And once I did, it lost its power. Because nothing unspoken ever really leaves you. It just hides in the dark. Now I speak more openly, not because I need to be heard, but because honesty has become my peace. There's something else I learned, something quieter. Forgiveness isn't about saying, "It's okay." It's about saying, "It's over." It's laying the stone down because you finally understood it was never yours to carry. One night, not long ago, I stood outside after a long day. The air was cool, and the sky was clear enough to see the faint trace of the moon. I whispered, "Thank you." Not to her, not even to myself, just to life, for all of it. The love, the heartbreak, the lessons, the stillness, because every piece had shaped me. Today, my life is simple, not dull, just peaceful. I spend time with my son. I read, I write, I listen. Sometimes I help others who are where I once was. Men and women who love deeply, lost themselves, and are trying to find their way back. I tell them this: the goal isn't to stop feeling. The goal is to stop confusing pain with passion. Love shouldn't make you smaller. It should expand you, your courage, your quiet, your truth. Now when I think of love, I think of something like the wind, gentle but strong, invisible but everywhere. It doesn't demand to be seen, it just moves through and around, carrying what's ready to be carried. Maybe that's what true love is. Not a storm that consumes, but a wind that passes. leaving you standing, rooted, and finally free. So if you're listening to this, maybe sitting in your car or lying awake and trying to make sense of it all, I want you to remember one thing. You are not broken because you loved the wrong person. You are wiser because you did. You saw the truth of love, the beauty and the cost, and now you get to choose something gentler, something real, something that doesn't take you away from yourself. Let the wind move through your life. Let it take what's gone, let it bring what's meant. Because healing isn't about finding peace at the end. It's about finding peace through it all.